Your mind was taught to think a miracle means God acts while man stands still. That idea feels holy, but it can become a hiding place for laziness. Scripture reveals something sharper, a partnership between divine command and human obedience. God forms the vessel before he releases the sign. He trains the man before he confronts the throne. He hides the weapon before he throws it. Moses did not enter Pharaoh's court as a bewildered shepherd. He entered as a man educated by Egypt, broken by exile, and instructed by God. He knew the palace from within. He knew the wilderness from beneath. He knew the throne's theater. He knew the desert's teeth. And when God sent him back, nothing in his life was wasted. The miracle was not less divine because nature was involved. It was more terrifying because nature obeyed God at the exact moment. God does not waste preparation. Moses had once been adopted by Pharaoh's daughter and raised inside the royal house of Egypt. The Hebrew child grew up among the highest ranks of Egyptian power, learning the air of courts and the grammar of command. He saw how power moves before words are spoken, through distance, color, guards, incense, silence, and ritual sequence. He watched priests turn timing into awe, and watched awe harden into obedience inside the minds of frightened men. Egypt did not rule only through weapons. It ruled through symbols that made authority feel carved into the bones of the world. The magicians were not circus performers. They were guardians of Pharaoh's invisible crown. Their task was to make the throne appear untouchable, as if every rival power could be matched, absorbed, or mocked. Moses saw the hidden frame behind that spectacle, because he had once lived close enough to study its machinery. He knew the rituals. He knew the priesthood. He knew the political theater. He knew the hidden methods. He knew how Egypt made fear look sacred. But palace knowledge can poison a man if God does not burn it clean. So God opened the second school, and the classroom was Midian. After Moses killed the taskmaster, the royal mask cracked, and the trained son of Egypt fled into the desert. The court disappeared behind him, and the wilderness rose before him like a sentence written in heat. In Midian, Moses learned shepherding, silence, hardship, survival, discipline, and the humiliating slowness of hidden years. He learned terrain that does not flatter the ambitious, and weather that does not kneel to royal education. He learned how animals panic, how venom hides, how thirst commands, and how a single mistake can become a grave. He learned desert plants not as decoration, but as instruments of survival, medicine, danger, stimulant, sedative, and restraint. He learned that creation is not dead material. It is a field of forces waiting for the right command. More importantly, God himself became his teacher. God spoke to him. God corrected him. God instructed him. God gave him signs. God told him what to say. God prepared him to return. The burning bush was not a mood, it was a command. The fire that did not consume the bush revealed a power Egypt could not manage through priests, formulas, or guarded rooms. God did not send Moses back as a fugitive prince with nostalgia for court knowledge. God sent him back as a weapon, forged from Egypt, wilderness, and divine command. That is the mechanism people miss. It is nature aligned under God. Moses carried 2 layers of knowledge when he returned to Pharaoh. He understood Egypt from the inside because he had grown up around its royal house and priestly systems. He understood the desert from the ground because 40 years had pressed its laws into his hands, eyes, breath, and bones. The Egyptian magicians knew palace techniques, Nile materials, controlled rituals, prepared chambers, and court illusion.
Moses knew those things too, but he also knew what waited beyond the Nile Valley, where Egypt's systems grew blind. He knew dangerous animals as living forces, not merely symbols on a crown or painted guardians on a wall. He knew plant force, animal force, timing, pressure, restraint, release, and the violence hidden inside stillness. But even that superior knowledge was not his crown. God was the crown. God was the commander. God was the source. Every natural detail became powerful because it was placed under divine instruction. This is why Aaron mattered.
God told Moses that Aaron would be his prophet, the visible mouth before the invisible command. Aaron became the public spokesman, while Moses remained the chosen authority, receiving God's direction behind him. This was not weakness, it was concealment. Pharaoh's court knew Moses had history in Egypt, and the magicians would have studied him as a returning insider. They would have watched his posture, his timing, his gestures, and every trace of Egyptian training still attached to him. They would have hunted for the method before the sign had time to strike the imagination of the court.
Aaron gave them the wrong target. To Pharaoh, Aaron looked like a Hebrew laborer, a man from the slave people, easy to dismiss and easy to underestimate. He held the staff. He spoke publicly. He performed the early signs. Moses received the command. God directed the confrontation. The power was concealed before it was revealed. Heaven often hides the blade in plain sight. Then came the staff. Aaron threw it down before Pharaoh, and it became a serpent on the palace floor.
Egypt understood the serpent because serpents moved through its crowns, rituals, warnings, sacred images, and royal imagination. This was not a random creature, it was an invasion of Egypt's own symbol language. The serpent represented venom, protection, kingship, danger, divine threat, and controlled terror. God struck Pharaoh with a sign Pharaoh's own world could understand. The magicians answered quickly because threatened power always tries imitation before surrender. They threw down their own staffs, and their staffs also became serpents before the watching court. The surface looked equal. That is the trap. Imitation makes the eye lazy. Their mechanics can be understood as controlled serpent handling, joined with chemical manipulation. The Egyptian staffs may have been serpents forced into rigidity, inactivity, and staff-like appearance before the performance. A snake can be restrained, chilled, stunned, compressed, or drugged until its body hardens into deceptive stillness. Ancient Egypt sat inside trade routes filled with resins, roots, spices, balms, narcotics, bitter compounds, and ritual preparations. Mandrake could serve the world of sedation, altered bodily state, and controlled stupor. Myrrh belonged to the world of resins, preservation, medicine, masking, and sacred preparation. Balm carried the scent of healing, softening, soothing, and bodily manipulation. Spices could mask odors, irritate tissue, influence handling, and cloak the conditions of a prepared creature. Bitter almond-related compounds belong to a darker plant knowledge, where potency, danger, and shock lived close together. Under this reconstruction, the magicians did not create life from wood. They weakened living serpents, made them resemble staffs, then revived them enough to counterfeit transformation. The trick depended on reducing life first, then displaying its partial return. It was weakness dressed as wonder. That method carried a wound inside itself. A serpent dragged out of sedation does not return as a complete predator. It wakes slowly, disoriented, sluggish, impaired, chemically compromised, and vulnerable to any alert creature beside it. The magicians could impress Pharaoh's eye, but they had damaged the very force they needed for the contest. Their serpents lived, but their living edge had been dulled. Their miracle was already tired when it touched the floor. Now look at Moses. God had trained him beyond the palace, inside the raw school Egypt feared. In the wilderness, Moses would have learned plants that did not grow for spectacle, but for survival, force, and consequence. One plant becomes central in this reconstruction: Sinai ephedra. Sinai ephedra belongs to the desert world, a hard plant associated with stimulation, dryness, alertness, and bodily activation, where Egypt's method sedated serpents into staff-like stillness. Moses' God taught knowledge could preserve aggression. The theory is not that Moses performed apart from God. The theory is that God taught Moses how to align natural force with divine timing. Sinai ephedra becomes the mirror opposite of the palace sedative. Egypt dulled the serpent. Moses sharpened it. Egypt weakened life for display. The magicians created a waking stupor. Aaron released a living predator. This is partnership, not emptiness. God commands, man obeys, nature aligns. Aaron's staff, under this reconstruction, involved a desert serpent held rigid without being reduced to helpless stupor.
The creature was not crushed beneath heavy narcotics until its instincts were ruined. It was restrained in a way that preserved alertness, predatory force, and aggression.
When released at the right moment, impact became trigger, motion became awakening, and stillness became attack. Moses understood release because the wilderness had taught him restraint. Moses understood aggression because the desert had made survival honest. Moses understood timing because God had made delay into a 40-year discipline. But Moses did not choose the stage. God chose it. Moses did not invent the mission. Aaron's serpent swallowed the serpents of the magicians, not frightened them, not matched them, swallowed them. The serpent of divine command consumed the serpents of counterfeit technique before Pharaoh's throne. Egypt's snakes were sluggish because their own method had weakened them. Aaron's serpent was active because the living force had been preserved. Egypt had copied the surface. God dominated the substance. The swallowing was not an animal detail. It was a political execution. The magician's staffs represented rank, office, ritual authority, and the right to stand near Pharaoh as sacred experts.
When their serpents disappeared, their authority disappeared with them inside the sign God had commanded. Pharaoh watched his own hidden arts get eaten in public, yet his heart hardened around the throne inside him. That is how pride survives exposure. It would rather deny reality than surrender identity. The contest continued because Pharaoh would not bow. Aaron remained visible through the first signs, while the magicians kept trying to compete, analyze, imitate, and protect the palace illusion. They attempted to match the Nile turning to blood, striking Egypt's bloodstream, thirst, economy, religion, and national imagination. But their imitation only deepened the wound, because counterfeit power cannot heal what it copies. Then came frogs, climbing into beds, ovens, kneading bowls, houses, bodies, and the sacred order of daily life. The magicians reproduced frogs again, answering disaster with more disaster, while pretending it was mastery. This is what false power does when cornered. It multiplies the plague. Then came dust. Aaron stretched the staff, and the dust of the earth became gnats on man and beast. Dust is the material Egypt could not glamorize, the low thing beneath sandals, bricks, graves, and forgotten labor. The magicians tried to imitate the sign, and their system finally broke. No sedated serpent could explain it. No Nile material could control it. No prepared chamber could contain it. No ritual theater could stretch that far. Their techniques had reached the edge of the map. Then the defenders of Pharaoh's aura confessed the truth. This is the finger of God.
They did not say Moses had found a better trick. They did not say Aaron had discovered a hidden Egyptian method. They admitted that the power behind Moses was not merely chemistry, ritual, timing, or court knowledge. They confessed, limit is where idols bleed. After that collapse, the confrontation changed. The magicians were no longer serious rivals because their ability to imitate had failed in front of the king they served. Their confidence had broken, and their mouths had testified against the system they were paid to protect.
Moses no longer needed to remain concealed behind Aaron in the same way. He stepped forward more openly as the servant God had chosen, speaking and acting under divine command. Aaron had not become useless. Egypt's imitation had become exposed. The hidden blade could now gleam. This is the lesson for your own life. Stop imagining partnership with God as passivity wearing holy clothing. God prepares you through places you would not choose, then commands you at moments you could not arrange. He uses your palace, your exile, your discipline, your scars, your knowledge, and your obedience. But he never lets the tool pretend to be the source. Moses' Egyptian education gave him insight into Pharaoh's court. Midian gave him wilderness skill, animal knowledge, plant knowledge, silence, survival, and restraint. God gave him mission, authority, words, signs, timing, strategy, and victory. Egypt had mandrake, myrrh, balm, spices, bitter almond, and the chemistry of weakened serpents. Moses had Sinai ephedra, desert training, concealed strategy, Aaron's front position, and the command of God. Egypt knew how to make life look like a staff.
God taught Moses how to make stillness become judgment. The counterfeit can copy motion. It cannot copy command. The sedated serpent can wake. It cannot defeat the living one. And when the living sign swallows the false one, do not harden your heart.